I don't really know Tom Bowling very well, but we have a lot of friends and associates in common, and he's been active in mariculture on a lot of different fronts. Currently lives in Palau, and he's going to discuss some of the perks and challenges of doing that kind of thing in the Pacific Island. So help me welcome Tom Bowling.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate it. Nice small crowd, that's just what I wanted. It's been a while since I've spoken in public. It's pretty remote in Palau, as you all know, and it's a big novelty for my wife and I to be here in Denver, getting around the city. It's a whole new world for us. I just want to start off by saying, I guess, with my referring to my background, I've done sort of marine biology at James Cook, and then sort of fell out of the academic world due to a lack of patience, I think was my biggest problem. I wanted to sort of get busy with the science that we already have. So I went into the private sector, and I found a few new seahorse species. Well, they were already described, but they hadn't been kept alive or cultured, so I got into that in Australia for a while, which was pretty exciting times. With the diving especially, we got to dive some amazing places. From there I ventured to the Marshall Islands and ran the Marshall Islands mariculture farm for ORA for a few years. With my wife. That was our learning curve for living in the Pacific, is the way I attribute that experience. And then, back to Australia and worked in some public aquariums and did some construction in public aquariums, and then basically realized that our calling was back in the Pacific, and I felt, actually just in relation to what the last session was about, the legislation, the red tape, it's pretty thick and heavy in Australia as well, and I kind of decided I had to go to a developing nation where I could get busy and get things going. So let's get into it. So that's the Bumphead Parrotfish. That's Bulbometapon miricatum, and I realize he's not really an ornamental species, although I'm hoping to change that and your opinion on that by the end of this talk. Okay, so why Palau? I did have to do a lot of work to sort of get there. It took us probably 7 years from the original time we decided we want to try and to get there and be a legitimate aquaculture operation. There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of sort of barriers, I guess, to foreigners to get in, but once you do get there, it's obviously worth it. It's a beautiful place. So we've got a lot of fish species. It's politically stable. It's also very safe compared to other nations in the Pacific. There's some in particular that have been quite risky lately. Sorry, so back to a lot of species of fish and obviously a lot of species of corals. You see on the map though, it's just outside the coral triangle, so we don't quite have the density of Indonesia and through that area, but it's certainly good enough for what we're trying to do. The other thing about it is because it is a small group of islands, there are sort of very focused points where you can go dive and see the spawning aggregations, and they're very predictable. So every 2 weeks, whether it's the new moon or the full moon, you can actually go and see between 8,000 to 30,000 fish. They're always there and they're always laying eggs. It's pretty amazing. And it's also, I don't know if you've heard, but Palau is it's just recently been declared, so it's about to be signed over as the world's first marine sanctuary. So they're literally stopping all commercial fishing. That includes all pelagic, long-lining, everything. And it's something they have to phase out. I think they have to allow the fishing permits to expire, which are maybe 5 years or something, and then it goes to proper marine sanctuary. So that's exciting for us, just for the purpose of aquaculture, I suppose. And the last one, which you'll all be jealous of, is I have seawater on tap. That's a nice thing. So that's Palau there. It's sort of directly above Papua New Guinea where the flag mark is. And as you can see, it's sort of, there's actually quite a strong current, like a very strong current between Philippines and Palau. You can sort of see, is that laser going to work? No, it's not working. Yep, there. So right through that gap. And that's actually acted as a very strong barrier, it seems. And so there is quite a significant reduction in the diversity of species from Philippines to Palau. And then again to Yap, and as you all know, the sort of further east you go, it drops out quite dramatically. So there's sort of the Republic of Palau, and you can see it's the islands in the south. It's a pretty incredible habitat, and in there we get things like the jellyfish lake you might have heard of. There's a lot of sort of very incredible little habitats with endemics and amazing Actually, one of the things that always blows me away is with the rock islands. They're like big mushrooms, and they have quite steep overhangs. So they're at the surface. They're a steep overhang of rock, but they create a lot of shade. So you actually get, hundreds of different kinds of deep water, like favids and chalice corals and stuff, and they're all growing in 2 foot of water. It's incredible, and you can just spend hours drifting through those and seeing these incredible growth forms. Okay, so now we're zooming in. That's the south end of the main island. It's called Bubbled Up, and we're sort of just zooming in there. You can see that that's sort of estuarine inlet, and I'm just on the mouth of that. So up there on the top left, that's the hatchery that I managed to get hold of. And then we're right now installing a seawater intake to this channel, which means we can pump water high tide or low tide. Right now I'm restricted to high tide, but it still gets the job done. I'll just show you some slides of the hatchery itself, where we're set up. You can see we've got some fiberglass raceways out the front, so we've just started doing a few corals and the gorgonians. And we're right now waiting basically for some legislation to change there to allow us to get exporting, but we've already been given the green light, but it's something island style. It takes a little time, so we're just waiting that through. So there's some stuff going on. We've got pretty high flow rate. In the middle tank is the gorgonians, and then down here there's some soft corals and clams that I buy from the locals. I made a point of not spawning clams yet because there already is actually an established aquaculture industry there. As many of you would know, there is stuff from Palau. It's pretty limited right now. There's only really Doraza and some soft corals and maybe some corallomorphs, but that's going to change. We're sort of working with some local farmers there, and we're trying to increase the diversity and focus on what's special in Palau. That's a terrible photo, but this is just to show you the entry area. We have a bunch of broodstock tanks. This is for the aquarium species that we have. And it also acts as a sort of a welcoming area. We're sort of trying to bring tourists and school groups through and basically open their eyes to sustainable options that they can get into. These are some of the breeding tanks, the larval tanks. And they have obviously been instrumental to do things like the parrotfish. Like I tried for about 14 months and tried various techniques, including different flow rates, small volume stuff, and it always came down to just massive volume. And I mean, it's obviously got to do with several parameters, but yeah, you just can't beat volume. It's like 15 tons, and the larvae drift around for a long time, so they need that stability. Okay, so what I'm focusing on with my work is it's with food fish and aquarium fish, but you'll see through the presentation I'm doing quite a few species, but there's good and bad with getting out there and catching eggs from a wild spawn. But obviously you've got reliable spawning, so like with the red snapper, the Janus boha, and that's not really an aquarium fish, they're a bit aggressive for that, but they will literally spawn every full moon, and there's probably 3 or 4 locations in the island that you can go to, and there will be 6,000 fish, and once you know the behavior, like you can literally pull up, put your tank on, jump in, get the eggs, get back in the boat and go home. It's pretty amazing. It's clockwork. So they're a good food fish species, and they were the first one that I trialed just to kind of prove proof of concept. And of course, the big point there is no cost for broodstock husbandry. So when you're dealing with any big fish or any sensitive species that won't breed in captivity, then obviously this has some use. Disadvantages, obviously the weather. There's a really strong current, so pretty tired by the end of it. By the time because I use a big plankton net, basically like a butterfly net, and I'm swimming with twin tanks on my back and some big fins, so it sort of wears you out by the end of it. You obviously get plankton in the net as well, so we've worked out a technique using iodine and some other ingredients just to basically nuke everything by the eggs and get some clean water, and it seems to be working pretty well. The best survival we've had so far is 10%, which for aquaculture that's pretty decent. For a mass spawning fish. And of course other species, so we've had a few interesting random fish pop up. Sometimes they've been predatory, which wasn't good, but that happens. Okay, so this is the twin spot snapper. I'm just going to show you some pictures of these guys to start it off, and then we'll move on to the bumphead. So yeah, these guys are very popular as a food fish. However, they are prone to getting ciguatera, so in a lot of areas the reef's just full of them because they're toxic, no one eats them. But in Palau, it doesn't get ciguatera, so they do eat them in Palau, but they do it sustainably. As you can see, there's still healthy populations. So that's a spawn in process right there. You can see it's usually the front, like the first two or three fish, one of those will be the female, and the males will rush and just basically try and outcompete each other to get closest, obviously, and get involved there. Yeah, so there I am, hard at work. And there's a few workplace hazards as well. That's almost 4 meters, that girl, and she's always turns up right when you least expect it, right behind you. It's pretty frightening, big girl. Okay, so that's yeah, obviously an egg sample, and I'll just go through the development quickly because this fish isn't exactly ornamental, but yeah, you can see there, that's sort of that's the first one we got through ever. We only got one on the very first batch, and we managed to grow him right out. I've still got him. And yeah, there's the result. Okay, this is the exciting one for me. And yeah, I guess the best thing about it in Palau is that they do have a very strong conservation values there, and they have culturally, like from the past. It's not something new. So they actually took it upon themselves. They noticed the stocks were getting low because they're very easy to get parrotfish at night. Obviously, they're just sleeping under the reef, and everyone was targeting them pretty heavily because they are delicious. Apparently, I haven't tried them. And so my interest, though, in relation to that, is that in Guam, they have literally made them extinct. They've taken them all in Guam and parts of Saipan. They don't occur anymore, and there's no real chance for them to recolonize in any in the near term. Sorry, in the near future. So yeah, that was my first interest, was to try and breed these guys, just to crack parrotfish, because I don't know that anyone's done it. I haven't heard that anyone has done parrotfish, so it was exciting as an aquarist and as a biologist to actually get them through. But more importantly, what I'd like to do is use our facility to act as a nursery and work on some projects in trying to restock marine protected areas, and probably more remote areas where they're not going to be fished out straight away, because I know the Chamorro guys in Guam really love parrotfish, so they might not last there very long. And yeah, so as I've grown them out, I've realized that they've colored up quite nicely. I'll show you some photos shortly, and the behavior is quite surprising. I was expecting them to just tear into the corals and basically wreak havoc like the adults do on a reef, and these guys they're like 97% feeding on aquarium feeds and pellets, and very sort of placid. They kind of chase each other around a little bit. There's not much aggression, so yeah, there you go. That's an aggregation. About 3,000 or 4,000 on that day, I think. And that's them in the process. So you can see the female is actually the little one on the very left, and the rest are all just males just fighting each other over it. Excuse me. Do I have a video here? I think I do. Excuse me. Now, I'll just play this until we get to the spawning scene. It goes on a little bit, so I'll stop it. I've been working with these guys. They're called Unique Dive Expeditions, and they've been researching this for years for the tourism aspect. And so it's been lucky for me because they've done a lot of the homework already, so I could kind of just jump on the boat with them and jump in with these parrotfish. So the average size of those guys is almost 3 foot, probably around 3 foot size would be average. And then if you get out into the remoter reefs, you'll actually get the bigger adults. They're like 4 foot long, and they're usually with a harem, and they don't come to these. This is sort of like the young kids at the disco or something. So you can see they kind of, normally they're cruising slowly, and here they get a little agitated, and the males start going very white in the face, like a lot of the small parrots will when they're flashing and courting. And then look at that. So then that's when they're about to kick off. They get quite aggressive, and they'll actually headbutt each other and it literally sounds like a shotgun crack underwater. It's incredible. It's so loud. And they've apparently been witnessed doing that to corals to break them up as well. So I hope they don't do that in the aquarium, right? But yeah, there they go. See that? So it's quite a spectacle. And often you'll have oceanic blacktips in the background, and they'll dart in. They kind of wait till the female starts to rush, so obviously all the males are distracted, and then that's when the white tips will come charging in and just try and snatch one up. So it's a risky reproduction, huh? You can see in the background how many there are. It's pretty incredible. Okay, so that's basically what I do while the other guys are videoing and swimming around photographing. It's obviously got a huge tourism draw card, and it's really boomed in the last year. These guys are booked out for 2 years straight, every spawn, so now they've got to work on protocol because they're all jumping in, and tourists are kind of swimming around just chasing the bumpheads and breaking up the school a bit, so it's obviously an issue that's got to be dealt with. So that's just a close-up of an egg just on development. They develop within about 15 hours. It's pretty incredible. They develop very, very fast, very small fry. I didn't even get a photo till these guys were, over 3 weeks. That's them at day 25. When they hatch, they're under 2 millimeters, so they're tiny, and they were hard to get feeding. That was my biggest challenge, I think, was getting the right food in the tank. I ended up using a mix of plankton, basically strained plankton, and then also culturing our own rotifers and copepods for later. They get quite cute though. See the colors coming up on that guy, day 37. And voracious feeders, they just take Artemia like there's no tomorrow. And then that's them getting a little bigger and some more color, 6 weeks. And then this is them now, really. They're sort of colored up surprisingly well, and like I said, the behavior also is kind of threw me, they're feeding on ornamental fish feeds basically, so it's interesting. What else? We got one more. Not the best shots, I've got to get a new camera. These guys, they're 6 to 7 months, and they've actually stunted. They're kind of really slowed growing, and I was talking to a few gents last night suggesting that perhaps it's a hormonal thing with one of the bigger ones in the tank, maybe inhibiting the growth of the others. So I'm going to stick them on flow through when I go back and see if that changes. But at the same time, they're quite a good size, really. I've got a lot of interest from Asia to buy them for aquariums, so it's a good size right now. They're perfect. Okay, so this is the success I had this year. This was also very exciting. This is probably one of the best dives I've ever done, certainly in Palau. Basically, I don't know if you know the fish, the blue line Seabream. It's got a few other names, but they gather for 3 days a month for 3 months of a year only. So it's like I've got a short window to get them. Yeah, and they gather at 40 meters along this wall down at Palau Island. It's one of the most southern islands of Palau with a very strong current that rips through, and they gather in the tens of thousands. So you can have anywhere between 30 and 100,000 there. Dense schools, and yeah, it's pretty spectacular. There's a bit of video. It's not great, but you can get the gist. That's a young one there, so day 22. And yeah, eating surprisingly big prey. So that's also handy for aquaculture, obviously, to raise them out. I'll just flick through here. There's some range of photos. Day 40, you can see the color coming into the caudal and the dorsal head as well. Then they get that distinct black line. And at one stage, we actually thought they were cannibalistic. I didn't sleep for 2 nights thinking that they were eating each other and that the species was no longer good to raise, for the industry. And then we worked out there was actually a juvenile long-nosed emperor in there, and he was destroying them all. He was twice the size, and he was the culprit, so that was a big relief. So yeah, this is them now. They're sort of getting the dorsal ray out and starting to lose the black line, and some nice color through the body. They school really well. This is about as aggressive as it gets. They're almost like a cichlid courting behavior. They just get together and do this sort of little dance, and trying to decide who's bigger or better or something. And that's about it. There's no damage or aggression beyond that. So there you go. That's them now. So the black line's gone through the body, and now the blue lines are coming up. And the photo doesn't do it justice with the yellow, but the actual anal and the ventral are very yellow now. So. And they're bigger than the bumphead parrotfish already at 3 months, so it's interesting. They grow fast. So here goes the aggregation. And yeah, like I said, just an incredible dive, because while you're down there, you're at maybe 35 meters above them, and they're all just tunneling down to 80 meters. You're on a ledge, with incredible visibility, and you're just this huge mass. And then the females will separate and go below the males, and the males will color up, start sparring, basically trying to guess which female is going to take off, and then all of a sudden the females randomly will just start shooting up through the school of the males to the surface, and then it's all on. They rush, and then you get the oceanic blacktip sharks. They're like 8 foot, 9 foot charging in for them as well. So it's a circus. It's awesome. It's like fireworks or something. And I think we've got some video of that too. There you go. So that's one of the few actual spawning shots they got. You can see there's a female at the front, basically trying to get away, it looks like, more than anything. And you can see the trail of eggs and sperm basically in the water behind them. That's all the males just getting involved. So this video is not great. It's apart from a month ago, they got some, I think, a little bit better video. This is the only one I could get of the actual spawning. So you kind of catch it in the corners, but you'll see how fast it is. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, it's you can't even gauge the number of fish. That's why people guess 30 to 50,000 or in ranges like that, because unless you swim the whole length, you just can't get it. So yeah, they're lining up. So that's the wall I was talking about on the right, and they'll just face into the current and line up until the females are ready. They kind of race up and down, and males spar a little bit, and then once it's on, yeah. So their adult life cycle is still a bit of a mystery. Some people swear they go into the lagoon and just feed on sand in shallow lagoon areas, and others say they go to 200 meters and stay down there and just come back for spawning, but no one's really conclusively shown. So there you go. You can see that no one can catch it because it's so fast. The females just take off like a bullet. So you can. Yeah, that was apologies from the cameraman. I'm just going to show you now a quick snippet of them in the aquarium. So this is a mix of blue line, Seabream, the Bumphead Parrotfish, some pajama cardinals, and my Aptasia colony. And Dory. That's my daughter's pet. So yeah, what we're trying to do is culture everything, obviously, that we do. We're trying to avoid aquarium collecting, and Palau at the moment doesn't do that, so we're trying to keep with that notion. You know, not that there's anything wrong with it. I'm well aware it can be done sustainably, and I've been involved in it myself. But my interest, my passion is to try and, you know, dial in whatever we can to be cultured, and I really think there's you know, it is amazing. I've been sort of watching the aquarium industry in the US for a long time, you know, 20 years, I guess, on and off. And I went to MO99, for example, and met some of the guys from ORA, and that was all kind of in its infancy and getting going. It was very exciting. And to see what's happened in the last 10, 15 years, it's great. And the average hobbyists know and care about, you know, where their fish are coming from. And I think it's a great hobby. I'll just run through a few more things that we're doing. We're doing the lineatus, the rabbitfish. Those have some ornamental interest as well, actually. I was doing them for food originally, but there's quite a lot of interest for aquariums because they're a great grazer and they have a bit of color as well, which is nice. We just got some mandarins going. And we're doing some of the, you know, bread and butter species. There's not many clownfish in Palau, but we do have the skunks and the clarks and a few others. And yeah, orange line cardinals, a few zoanthids and soft corals that are quite colourful. But what I'm doing with the corals actually is more promoting the local farmers to do it. They've already got setups for clams and some soft corals, so I'm just trying to encourage them to find the, you know, the more ornamental species instead of just the brown sarcos and stuff, and get them going. We just found a big batch of these guys, which are pretty amazing, the colour. So we just started trying to culture those. They seem to be doing okay. Yeah, so that's everything we're breeding. I'm just going to wrap that up with a last video of my next, well, the boys say I'm dreaming, but this is my next target species, so we'll see. See if I can do it. We've got both these species aggregating in December through January, and especially the Moorish idols is something I'm excited about, trying to get eggs from those, because obviously they're one of those very difficult species. They're renowned. Everybody, you know, loves to hate them and hates to love them. But yeah, if we can raise those in tanks, I'm sure they're going to be far superior than a wild one for aquariums. There's only been one sighting of an actual spawn that I know of, and it's pretty amazing. They ball up and race up and down the reef wall until I guess the girls are ready, and then they just shoot to the surface, and they'll do an ascent from 20 meters to the surface and actually boil at the surface is what somebody witnessed. So I don't know if that's actually it, but I hope it is, because it's less work for me to get the eggs. There's a little bit of shark and hunting action in this video as well, I thought I'd share. So yeah, this happens on Blue Corner. This is one of the famous dive sites, and basically the divers get in with a reef hook. It's very strong current. You just hook in and inflate your BC and just sit steady, and basically every now and again one of the grey reefs will chase a trevally or a butterfly or anything into the rocks, and then this happens. It's pretty amazing. Everybody gets excited and looking for lunch. We've had a few people get bitten lately, so they're getting told to stay back more. There's people getting their cameras right in the mouths of the fish, you know. A bit risky. And then, so we've got the Morishidals, and then there's the orange spine unicorn, which I don't know that I'd be able to raise them. I believe I've seen the eggs, and I believe the fry are, you know, minute. So I'd like to think I could, but I don't know that one will be possible. And they've been sighted spawning as well, actually, so that's got potential to trial, but I don't like my chances. We'll see. So that's the orange spine unicorn. And I think that's all I've got for you. Thank you.